Good morning, students. Welcome back. I hope you all have done the test on money and banking, which was given, both one markers as well as the word file which I had sent. Today, we are going to talk about the concept of poverty line. In the last class, we talked about how poverty line was estimated in pre-independent India, and there was Dadabhai Naoroji's attempt, which were considered significant. In post-independent India, government has made several attempts to determine poverty in India. Many groups have been organized, many organizations have been formed to estimate India's poverty. So we will talk about that, what is poverty line, how poverty line is determined in India, what are the criticism of the methodology that we use to determine poor people in India, what opinions economists have about that methodology, and how do we categorize poor people. So let's start with today's session. So this is on page number 4.5 in the latest edition of Indian Eco. Okay, I told you all that in 1962 study group was formed by the Planning Commission, a study group just to study the concept of poverty and poverty line. And in 1979, Task Force on Projections of Minimum Needs and Effective Consumption Demand was formed. That was already told in the last class. And in 1989, an expert group again was constituted for the same purpose. Okay, so what is poverty line and how did these organizations find poverty line for India? Poverty line, it is obviously an imaginary line. It is the cutoff for the income distribution. Above this cutoff, the people who are earning above that cutoff, they are considered to be non-poor, and the people who are earning below this cutoff line, they are considered to be poor. And people who are on the line, they are also considered non-poor. It is only the below poverty line people who are considered poor. So let us suppose this 1,000 rupees per month per person is the poverty line in India, and this is this cutoff line. This is the imaginary line of income distribution. So the people who are above this line, they are all considered to be non-poor. Anybody earning 1,000 plus is considered to be non-poor, and the people who are lying below this, whose incomes are lying below this cutoff line, they are all called poor. Okay, how was it finally determined? First of all, this task force which was constituted by the government in 1979, they estimated the minimum calorie intake which people require on a daily basis. What is the minimum consumption level in terms of calories people need for survival, both in urban areas and in rural areas? So this was the first attempt by task force. They estimated the minimum calorie intake, that is the nutritional requirements of people on a daily basis in urban areas and in rural areas. So, and Planning Commission accepted its recommendations, the recommendations of the task force, whatever calorie intake they gave, that we'll just take it now. So Planning Commission accepted the recommendations in the same month, January 1979 it was formed, and they accepted its recommendations. Then how did we come to the income level? The monetary value, please write it down, this in the same form I have written it here. Then monetary value of minimum calorie intake was estimated by Tendulkar committee. So this is known as Tendulkar methodology. I am not so sure if it is mentioned in the book, because I think it is not mentioned. No, it is not mentioned. So please write it down. This monetary value of minimum calorie intake, like whatever is the calorie intake, let us suppose we need 1,000 calories per day, then what would be the poverty line? So 1,000, to consume 1,000 calories, how much money do we need? That was determined by Tendulkar committee. I have also written about the committee, a committee formed by Government of India in 2005 with Suresh Tendulkar as chairman to report on methodology of estimation of poverty. It was formed by the government in 2005, and Mr. Suresh Tendulkar was his chairman. And the purpose of the committee was to report on methodology of estimation of poverty. They have to find out the monetary value of that calorie intake, like to consume that calories, which is defined by task force, how much money do we require on a daily basis. So this was the nutritional calorie intake given by these committees. It was 2400 kilocalorie. It is actually kilocalories. I just don't know why in books they don't mention this K. It is actually kilocalories. So 2400 kcal in per capita. Capita does not have got anything to do with like capital. Per capita means per person. So 2400 kilocalorie per person per day, that is, and in rural areas. So every individual in rural areas needs 2400 kcal per day. That's the minimum calorie intake to be on the non-poor side, to remain on the non-poor side. And for urban areas, this number has been fixed at 2100 kcal. For urban areas, again, it is also per person and per day. So this number is fixed higher for rural areas. You have done it in earlier classes also. More calories are required in rural areas because there people are engaged more in physical work. Okay, greater physical work is required in rural areas as compared to the urban areas. Then the monetary value of these calories was calculated, and if it is asked what method India uses to determine poverty line, the name of the method is monthly per capita expenditure. Again, per capita means per person. So per person monthly expenditure we take into consideration to find out whether the person is poor or not. So if his or her monthly expenditure is at that cutoff point, that is his income also. Expenditure we are taking from the income's point of view. So if that person's income is above that cutoff point, which is determined by Tendulkar methodology, the person will be non-poor. And this MPCE is rupees 816, that is to consume 2400 kcal in a day. A person living in rural areas would require rupees 816 for a month. Okay, this is monthly per capita expenditure. So you don't have to write rupees 816 per person per month. No. If it is MPCE, it automatically means that it is for a month. So to consume 2400 kcal per day, a person in rural areas would need 816 rupees to satisfy those number of calories, to be able to consume that much nutrition. And to consume 2100 kcal per day in urban areas, a person would require 1000 rupees monthly. Like if the person is earning 1000 rupees in a month, then that person is considered non-poor. So yes, these are very small numbers. If we see the monetary value, these are very small numbers. 1000 rupees per month is really less for anyone to satisfy the hunger. Like okay, you can also take it in a household manner. If it is a family of 5, so everybody in the family would need 1000 rupees per month. So there should be around 5000 rupees what they should be earning. That should be the minimum earning of that family. If it is a family of 5 members, so in urban areas they should be having at least 5000 rupees with them in a month. And in rural areas, if it is a family of 5, then they need 816 into 5, that is rupees 4080 per month. Okay, that's the monthly per capita expenditure they would be needing if it is a family of 5 members. Please notice here, although the calorie requirement is higher in rural areas as compared to urban areas, that is 2400 as compared to 2100, the monetary value of those extra calories is still less than what it is required in urban areas. 2400 calories in rural areas can be bought in 816 rupees for a month, and 2100 calories in urban areas can be bought for 1000 rupees for a month. This is why, because the prices of these essential commodities is higher in urban areas as compared to rural areas. So even to consume less number of calories, they need more amount of money. To consume less than what rural people are consuming, they need extra money because prices of essential commodities are higher in urban areas. So let us just see this. This is page 4.5 of your book. Determination of poverty line. Minimum calorie intake first was estimated, and these are the calorie intakes. Then monetary value of those minimum calorie intake, which was estimated by Tendulkar methodology. And now poverty line divides the poor from the non-poor. See, if this is the poverty line, below this are all poor people and above this are all non-poor people. But there are a variety of poor and a variety of non-poor also. Not all non-poor come into the category of rich people, and not all poor are like at the category of utmost need of help. So, see, the poor people can be categorized as absolutely poor, very poor, or just poor. Then, just the ones who are above this poverty line, they're not so poor, but then obviously they're not rich. Then comes middle class, then we have upper middle class, then we have rich, then we have very rich. People earning more than that are called millionaires, and finally we have billionaires. So, there are variety of poor people and non-poor people. Let us categorize poverty now. There are many ways to categorize poverty. We have chronic poor. The topic is important. It usually comes for 1 mark. Who are all chronic poor? What is chronic poor? What is transient poverty? These two types are usually asked. Okay. So chronic, as the word suggests, chronic means actually for a long time. Means these people are poor for a long period of time in a year. Transient means for a short time or temporary. Temporarily, these people are temporarily poor. It means like they are not poor for the entire year. They may be in and out of poverty every time. And the third category is non-poor, like who are never poor actually. So this line I have drawn here, this is the income line. This here on the y-axis we are taking income, and this is the poverty line. So this is the threshold, this is the cutoff. Okay, anybody who is earning below this, they are all poor, and whenever they are below this, they will be called poor, and whenever they are above this, they will be called non-poor. So chronic poor, as it means that for a long time they are poor. So either they are always poor, means okay, this is the chart for their income level, and this is on x-axis. Let us suppose we have time. These are different months of the year. So in all the months of the year, their income is always below this poverty line. If this is, let us suppose we are talking about rural areas, and this is the poverty line, 816 rupees per person per capita. So this always poor people, their income is always below 816 rupees, and this is how their income chart is going on. So this category is chronic poor. Again, another category under chronic poor comes usually poor. Usually poor means usually they remain poor, but there might be some point of time in a year where their income goes above poverty line, like maybe like this. Otherwise they are all poor for the rest of the year. Okay, you can just draw the graph in any manner, just keeping the meaning intact. This category can include those landless laborers who are always poor, and then those small and marginal farmers who are usually poor throughout the year, but there might be some time, maybe the harvest time, where they get some money from the harvest that they sell in the market, and again they have no work because they have no working capital for the next season, so they remain usually poor throughout the year. So this category can include those people. Again, it also includes all those rag pickers, beggars, it includes them also. So this is chronic poor, always poor, or usually poor. Next comes is churning poor. Churning again is means for a short period of time. So the churning poor, they keep moving in and out of poverty like this. Maybe maybe a bit larger than the very small farmers. So these are all churning poor. Their income sometimes is above the poverty line, and at the other times it is below the poverty line. So these people are called churning poor, and churning poor comes in the category of transient poor. Then we have occasionally poor, like they're not otherwise poor, but on certain occasion in a year their income falls below the poverty line. Maybe construction workers, uh, let us suppose construction workers, they can come in the category of churning poor whenever their income falls, whenever they don't have work in the year. I think their income must be moving in and out of poverty. Whenever they are engaged in the work, they must be earning enough to remain above the poverty line, and when they don't have work, they are below poverty line. And these occasionally poor people, who can be them occasionally poor, you think and tell me. Occasionally poor can be those people who are otherwise non-poor for the entire year, but their income, might fall below poverty line for a certain time of the year. They can be maybe some push cart vendors. Maybe, I don't know if there are some vendors who earn good enough to remain above poverty line, but some season might be affecting their income at some part of the year, so their income might be falling below poverty line for that part of the year. Okay, so both of these categories, churning poor and occasionally poor, come under the head category of transient poor, which means temporarily poor. They are not permanently poor for the entire year, but they are temporarily poor. And these two categories are mainly poor only. Okay, either it is always or usually these people are mainly poor. And then we have never poor, the non-poor people. Obviously their income will not be touching the poverty line. Their income will always be above poverty line, and that can be anywhere. You can draw the chart in any manner. There is no hard and fast rule. But again, if it is churning, you have to show the moving in and out of poverty. If it is occasionally, you just have to show some occasion where income is falling below poverty line, and otherwise their income is above poverty line. And if it is always, you will show income levels always below poverty line. If it is usually poor, so usually their income is below poverty line, but there might be some point of time in the year where their income crosses the poverty line. And never poor, their incomes should not be crossing the poverty line from above, like it should not go down. Okay, next topic is criticism of poverty line. I have also written in the bracket important. The topic is important. On what grounds the methodology of poverty line, which we use to estimate the number of poor people in the country, is criticized? On what grounds it is criticized? Okay, again, as we have talked about, among the poor people also there are a variety of poor. Absolutely poor, very poor, and just poor, who are just below the poverty line. So there are the ones who are the poorest of the poor. Like from the set of the poor people, there are some people who are the poorest of all. So they need the most urgent help actually from the government. They need the most number of remedial measures to just correct their situation. But this poverty line does not differentiate between the different categories of poor, and it groups all the poor people together. Okay, obviously the people who have no source of income at all, and the ones who have some source of income, maybe, okay, if it is 816 rupees per month, they are still able to earn 800 rupees per month. So the ones who do not have any source of income, they first need the help. So on this grounds, these critiques have, gone against this method, that this poverty line does not differentiate between different categories of poor. It groups all of the poor together and does not differentiate between them. So it is difficult to identify the poorest of the poor who need help the most, who need utmost help. It is difficult to identify. Then there are many important factors like health and education which are ignored, totally, completely ignored in this poverty line. As we have seen, we first take the minimum calorie required and then we just take the monetary value to obtain those calories. And that's how we get to the poverty line. No other basic need of the country like of the person is taken into consideration, like whatever five basic needs we talk about: food, clothing, shelter, and then education and health. Not even all these five basic facilities are taken into consideration to come at this poverty line. So this is also one of the very big criticism of this poverty line, that health and education sectors are completely ignored in this line. Accessibility to basic education, drinking water, they have been ignored. And the final criticism is non-inclusion of social factors. Like there are many sources, there are many factors whose monetary value you cannot count, but then there should be some provision that you should be taking its, importance into consideration. Maybe like literacy, and then your lack of civil freedom. How much freedom do you actually have in the society, whether you are able to take decisions, whether you are allowed to participate in the society, whether you have equal opportunities, whether you have equal benefits, whether you are enjoying equal decision making, equal participation, involvement in the society or not. So again, this poverty line does not include any such factor, any social political factor, which actually affects individuals' life in a great way. I don't know if you remember or not, in class 9th, there was a chapter in economics, Poverty as a Challenge. And there also you must have read about it, that this poverty line, it does not, it ignores social exclusion. Social exclusion is when you exclude somebody from the society. You are depriving that person from the benefits, from the advantages, from the opportunities that he or she can enjoy in the society. So again, this method does not include any social factor. So on these grounds, our present poverty line is criticized, that it doesn't differentiate, so it is difficult to identify the poorest of the poor. Health and education sector factors are ignored, and social factors are also not included. So some of the economists, they have come up with alternative methods to find poverty. But still we have been using MPCE. Also, we are finding these index also. Alternative methods are Amartya Sen's SANE index. Then we have poverty gap index. We have squared poverty gap index. Also, we have Gini coefficient. It is a very popular index. All these indices, they are not there in your syllabus. I was just giving the names. There is one Gini coefficient, GINI. That is also one of the very important indices. Let us take the next topic. That is, do we have we actually seen any decrease in the poverty levels of the country, or it is just a manipulation of the numbers? Let us see what government and what economists have got to say about this. I have just written here that government claims decline in poverty trends, but economists raise doubts about it. Government claims obviously that yes, since independence, poverty has declined in the country. And yes, obviously, there is no doubt about it that poverty has declined in the country in all these years. But with has it really declined with what numbers government shows, or is there some other truth behind it? Let us see. Let us see on what basis government claims the decline in poverty trends. Okay, government says that our economic growth rate have gone high. It has gone higher. So higher rate of economic growth. Obviously, if economy is growing, if we are producing more goods and services, it means poverty trends are declining. Poverty is declining in the country. Second reason which government gives, these are the reasons government gives. Okay, bases used by government. So, higher rate of economic growth, increase in agricultural production, that our agricultural production over the years have multiplied, obviously since the onset of green revolution, which came in 1960s, late 1960s, that you will study in first three chapters in detail what policies government took, uh, like what all economic policies government took after independence till now. That is what unit 1 is covering, so we will use all that later, we will do all that later. So, but we all have a basic idea about increase in agricultural production, that with the coming of with the using of HIV seeds and all, we had big multiplication in the number of output that we had in our country. So there was increase in agricultural production, which has led to a fall in poverty. Third reason which government gives is providing employment in rural areas, that we have provided much employment in rural areas. Obviously there are many yojanas running in the country which have provided employment to people. Also, the last reason which government gives is economic reforms of 1991. This is the entire chapter 3 which we will be covering in the second term. Economic reforms of 1991. What major changes came in the economy in 1991? That is also one of the reasons responsible for fall in poverty. So these are the bases used by government. Please keep making notes of all the points I'm discussing, and in the same manner I have made it here. So this is what is there here. According to government, high rate of economic growth, increase in agricultural production, providing employment in rural areas, and economic reforms of 1991, they have resulted in a decline in poverty levels. Now let us see it from the economist's point of view. They raise doubts on the basis of what? So first of all, the criticism of poverty line also we covered the same points. The methodology followed to estimate poverty line is wrong. There is no stress on improving human lives, that is no stress on removing obstacles like poverty, sorry, like lack of access to health care, illiteracy, good drinking water, clean drinking water, and other resources. Then economists also say, or they claim, that number of poor has been manipulated to arrive at the low figures, just to show the statistics, less number of poor in the statistics, in the official statistics government has manipulated with the number of poor. And also economists believe that the consumption basket which is used by the government to find calorie intake is very narrow. Like also, we really need more calories, more consumption to survive at the minimum basic level. So these are all the views given by the economist, that but yes, poverty has declined over the years, especially in 70s, 80s, and then 90s, also 2000s. It has declined over all these last 50 years, but still, if we consider the present numbers of present number of poor people in India, the magnitude is still very high. The number is still significantly large. Although in the new census we will get to know the new numbers, the new statistics, because whatever the genuine data we have, that all relates to 2011 and 12. That is all the genuine data which covers the entire country, because census count gives all the information about people's income and every other social and economic aspect. So these numbers which we are using, that 22% of people in India are poor, it all relates to 2011 and 12. So that's all for today. Just make all the notes of this chapter. This was the concept of poverty line, the determination and the criticism. It is an important question. And are there actual decrease in the poverty levels or not? In the next class, we will talk about the trends of poverty. like with time, what numbers we actually observed in the country, state wise comparison, urban and rural area wise comparison, and all that. Take care, all of you. God bless you. And do not forget to pray for world's peace. One more thing, one last thing. Please let me know if you really need a doubt session or not that we can conduct on Zoom. That can be one live session with you all. Please let me know about that in the comment section or maybe on WhatsApp. Okay, thank you.